Hello and welcome to Zak's Traders Cafe. Today I'm joined once again for our weekly chit chat with Clem Chambes from newfn.com. How are you today, Clem?
I'm extremely well, even though the market is killing me.
Right. Well, that was probably a good place to start. They tried last week with the China tariff scare and Trump, saber rattling about that to get a crash. Didn't work. It's still the middle of October, so we're still in crash season. Now it's something about banks' credit or something that seems to be the problem.
Well, I think there's a mix. There's this banking thing that's going on, so they're going risk off on. Part two of Silicon Valley Bank, maybe. There's these car loans to people with no money, guys that have collapsed in the US, and they've got security, which is being used as security for security, and then that's been sold as security, and then they've bought cars and given the cars to people who can't pay, who've driven off with them. So that's left them
It's
with a
called a
big black
charity,
hole
isn't it?
of. Sorry?
That's like
Yeah,
a
that's right.
charity.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, that's causing eruptions. But there's also I smell the whiff of some kind of potential settlement or escalation in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. Because good old I'm going to get the name wrong in a minute. I'm going to say Petrofac when it isn't. Fair Expo, which is a huge iron ore mine in Ukraine, is up 10% this morning.
I looked at that. I saw that as well, and Eurasia is up as well, which is also in that kind of space. So I was looking at that and thinking the market's going down. Maybe the market doesn't want peace in Ukraine, but that sort of logic maybe doesn't
Well,
work.
it's like, what about if it's peace and maybe escalation? So it's you give us peace, or we got to give them tomahawks, and you know
Mm,
where they're going to be heading,
yeah.
right? So you've got a mix. So gold goes up, and a very cheap iron ore mine in Ukraine goes up. Yeah,
Mm.
because if it's a 50-50,
Well, yeah,
the chances of.
there's no doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt. Even if there was an escalation, Ferrexpo wouldn't go any lower. But if there was peace, Ferrexpo would triple probably.
Yeah, and BA and Chemring and those guys are down 4%. Yeah.
Hmm.
So if
Ah.
if if peace is declared, they lose 4% of their value, but obviously up goes Fair Expo.
Hmm.
So, but the point is, if peace was declared, it wouldn't change the picture for European defense. Because the classic thing that everybody says about Russia is to have truces, promise not to do it again, and then come back 3 years later. I mean, the non-aggression pact between the Nazis and Stalin, for example, is a perfect example of that. And
Yes,
and
I
Russia
think.
has a
Well, I
long
think.
history
Yeah, yeah.
of treaties which
Yeah,
they then violate after they've regrouped a bit. So Europe won't fall for that one, so they still have to rearm.
yeah. Yeah, I think the thing is, obviously, the Soviets went to Afghanistan. They go around the place. They like traveling, and they do all that stuff. But you're right that with certain type of people, the deals are not worth the paper they're printed on, and that does seem to be the case with the Russians. I don't know why that is the case. Maybe it's something in the air, something in the water. But
Historical. I mean, that's how it used to be with conflict. It used to be, every 4 or 5 years they'd slaughter everybody, and then they would agree around the table that this little bit of land would be ours and that little band would be yours, and then they'd all promise to be nicey forever, and then 3 years later they'd be killing each other again. For 1,000 years. So it's not as if it's a new idea. It's just that's how it used to be, and perhaps certain places in the world are a little bit less developed and still think war is a good idea.
yeah, well, is it less developed mentally or is it less developed culturally? I mean, that's the problem. Is it in their nature or is it their nurture? But maybe that's a subject or a question for
It's
another time.
governance. It's the governance system. It's a system of governance. It's that's all it's down to. And one of the big assets of the West, although it might not feel like it most of the time, it is the system of governance is a lot more robust than in most other places in the world. In fact, almost all. I mean, it's hard to find a system of governance which you would prefer to live under outside of Europe and America.
Well, China's good because that's not even an enemy of the UK anymore. It's brilliant.
I'm
Friends of
stopping off
yours?
there in a few weeks. I'm
Friends
not
of
going to say
yours?
anything lewd.
No, no, but actually, no, I looked up China because I wanted to know, because obviously I like to be very well informed. So I looked up China on its Wikipedia page, and it actually said it's China is blah 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 1.4 billion people, whatever it is. It's classified as a democratic dictatorship, and I just thought
Democratic dictatorship. That's the new one. I
that is
like the
just
sound
it's
of that, as
absolutely
long as I'm
brilliant.
dictator.
But no, that wasn't actually that wasn't the big reveal. The big reveal is that that's actually what we have here. We have a democratic dictatorship. So it's like, thank you for
I'm not
that.
so sure about
So
that.
and so the
Uh,
reason,
uh,
so you should look it up. Everyone look like it is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And I suppose maybe they asked, they asked what's his name, Xi or whatever his name is, to sort of, they must have consulted with him because you wouldn't want to upset him. But democratic dictatorship, but it is. I think the UK is. If we're not in, we don't regard China as a threat. It's because we are also a democratic dictatorship, and we're trying to model ourselves on the Chinese. I mean, it's just got, it works well, right? I mean, China works well.
well, I mean, yeah, the level of freedom in the West has been rolled back, for sure. And, governments always tend towards authoritarianism because it's easier to be an authoritarian than it is to deal with all the mess. And it's easier to shut stuff down than monitor it properly, which is what the FSA do all the time. Oh, there's a broker, shut it down. Then we won't have to worry about it. Oh, there's another one, shut it down. We won't have to worry about it. That's what regulators do. Oh, there's 2,000 companies, squish them all into five so we don't have to do so much work.
But
Oh,
that's
look,
what
they've
that.
all blown up and take the system down. Oh, it wasn't our fault. Oh, it was, wasn't it? Oh, yeah. No, we won't admit to it.
Yeah, no, it's you've just taken the words right out of my mouth. It's quite irritating sometimes that we both agree on things, but
I'm sorry about
let's.
that.
So,
I'm
yeah,
sorry
it
about
is
that.
actually
I do
quite.
not live
It's
in your country. I do not live in your country. This is
yeah.
your problem.
The so this week a potential crash or not on the stock market.
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of a little bit funny, isn't it? I mean, you wake up this morning and you look at the numbers and go, hold on a minute, what? And is it really about a load of car lenders in America, or is it something else? Something that is it's about fragility. Okay, a markets crash in the same way as avalanches fall. You got a lot of snow up the mountain, and someone sneezes hard, and a little snowball falls out of the mountain and knocks on another snowball, and then but before you know, you've got an avalanche because there's underlying fragility. Now, the fragility in the American market and therefore the global market is the fact that there's no longer excess liquidity in the American financial system, and you can see that by looking at the Fed's reverse repo, which is a facility where if you've got too much money as a bank, you give it to the Fed and the Fed pays your interest. Well, funnily enough, the Fed gave you the money in the first place, and it's kind of using that to adapt how much money is in the system. So if it prints too much money, it pays you to give it back and lend it back to the Fed and pays you interest. And that reserve repo has been gigantic for the last few years, and they've been grinding it down like they've been grinding down their balance sheet. Well, there's no money in the reverse repo anymore. And you can go look it up on the internet because the Fed kindly provides it. And you can see that chart going, and it was bouncing around where it should be. And in my opinion, suddenly it's gone. So it's now there's no spare money in the system. That's good news and bad news. If there's no money in the system and you've lent a load of money to a load of people lending money to people that are buying cars and driving off with them and not paying back, and when they go bust, you're held holding the baby. If there's no money in the system and you say, I'm a short couple of 100 million, can you have it, please? And everyone goes, no, we haven't got it. If it's in the reverse repo, they go, yeah, sure, you'll be fine.
You've gone
Yeah,
a bit
sure.
quiet, Clem. You've got a bit quiet. I don't know whether that's the our Sino friends trying to censor you or something, but
Am I quiet now?
um, see with you. Are you still quiet? Hold on.
I'm here. Let me keep talking because
Yeah,
you can
keep
always
talking. I
edit
can
it.
hear you, but you just went a bit quiet. That's all.
Okay, sorry about that. I will speak loudly.
Yeah.
So the reverse repo is empty. So the bucket of spare money is now dry and it's been brimming over for years after COVID. So it's now dry. So now you've got this banking thing popped up. There's no spare money to bail it out. Now the good news is the Fed can just print some and push it into the bucket, and everybody gets enough money to keep going, and it all goes away, just like Silicon Valley Bank. That's what happened in Silicon Valley Bank, and it was so serious for Silicon Valley Bank. The QT, the quantitative tightening they were doing, went into reverse. It went up for a few weeks and then started to come back down again. And again, you can see these if you go to the Federal Reserve site and you look at their balance sheet history page, you'll see the chart of it all. And if you go for reverse repo, US reverse repo, on Google, you'll find it and you'll see all this extra money disappearing because you've got to get the extra money to disappear because that's the money that creates your inflation. The extra money that you will see in the reverse repo is the money that the Fed's pulled out of the system because if they leave it in the system, you're going to get high inflation. So they pay the banks to give it back to them, to lend it back to them, to keep it from firing inflation. Well, as the system grows or people lose money or send it abroad or whatever, yeah, that spare money starts to dribble away and dribble away and dribble away. And when it's at a level where there's enough money in the system to keep it running smoothly, you leave it. Yeah. Or maybe you pump a bit more in if it starts to go down. Well, it's gone down now and it's gone negative. And therefore, the banks are in a little bit of a liquidity squeeze. And you'll see all the banks are all over the place, down quite heavily because the American banks are down heavily because of this squeeze, and all the other banks follow because it's all one big interconnected piping of liquidity. So that's one of the things that's causing it. And then there's a possibility that a major shift between peace and war in Ukraine might also be having a bit of an effect.
Right. So we hold our breath and we hope that the market, or most of us maybe hope that the market won't tank. Some of us might be short.
Buying
The,
opportunity, buy the
well,
dip.
well, exactly. The other issue which is going around at the moment, apart from the Chinese spy thing, is they're trying in this country anyway. They're trying to soften us up for the budget and how much taxes may go up. And I just had a question. Well, obviously you're a great taxpayer because you're in Monaco. But from that vantage point, do you think that we've reached a level, or we will have reached a level in taxation where it's almost like causing people to say, why am I paying so much for this? What am I getting in return? Is it sort of civil disobedience in terms of taxation and spending and everything else? Is that possible? And if it is possible, what could be the result of that?
Well, if you look at the UK, how many people are paying tax?
Uh,
I mean, it's probably less than half, right? So all that's happening, I mean, obviously they tax their own people, but that's not real tax. It's obviously it's they print the money, they give it to their own
mm,
employees and take it away again. I
yeah,
mean, what do you call that?
yeah,
But in the private sector, yeah, they're taxing the private sector. I mean, if you want to buy some nice real estate in central London, it's come down in price a lot because a load of people that got money left. So you get this something called the laughter curve, which
yeah.
is if you push taxation up, you get more money, you get more money, and then suddenly you don't get more money, you get less and less and less and less and less. Well, which side of the laughter curve is the UK on? I would think that it's probably gone over the top. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he said, "Oh, well, yeah, they're not going to be worried about people leaving if they put tax up. They've already left." And I said, "No, they haven't all left." He said, "Oh, anybody worth anything's gone." And he was an example of that, a billionaire that had gone, "Oh, I've had enough," and gone. Yeah. And that's what's happened. But the key problem is if you take all the money through the public sector, you don't get a very efficient allocation of capital. Therefore, you don't get a very efficient set of growth. And therefore, you don't really have the money to tax in the first place. So you get in a vicious circle of more and more public sector spending and less real GDP, i.e., GDP that isn't government inventing it as a number that is not true. Yeah. And you get less and less tax. You become poorer and poorer and poorer. And you probably end up spending more and more on your public sector because, you've got more and more problems. So that is where pretty much, well, America's there, Europe's there, Britain's there. It's a Western problem because organizations naturally grow and grow and grow until they collapse, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector. And at some point, they just naturally grow. They're almost uncontrollable. And I would say you're seeing that lack of ability to control the public sector in America. They tried it with Doge, and what have they been doing recently? Have you heard anything about them? So that got shut down.
Got
Yeah,
quiet, yeah.
Europe. Well, the public sector in Europe is not shrinking, is it? So if it keeps growing and your private sector shrinking, because the private sector makes the money, the public sector spends it. So if you shrink your private sector, you are basically, killing your chickens and wondering where the eggs are.
So yeah, but that's the thing. Why is it, why would you bother to work other than for for the public sector? There's a yes, Royal Professional Cleaning is a van that's just gone past my window, right? Okay, so Royal Professional Cleaning, I suppose they might clean an office or something like that. But they're going to have to charge more and more to the end user. That's going to be passed on and everything else. But it's just like it's there are some necessary things in the private sector, which I suppose will continue. So the cleaning service, I suppose, will have to continue. But there are a lot of things where
We
you
could
can just
nationalise that. Remember all the things that used to be nationalised in the 70s? The
yeah.
telephone companies, the gas, the water, everything was nationalised. The banks were nationalised. Yeah, your bank was, and you have to use, how rubbish the banks were back then. Yeah, and that's why they privatised everything. And how did it get to that? Because public sector grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows until it gets on the brink of collapse. Well, a lot of people would say that maybe the public sector is heading towards the brink of collapse.
Yeah, but you've got this sort of you described the thing about the Laffer curve, but then there's also the thing that if you're earning at less than 20 grand a year, or 20 or 30 grand a year, let's say, what's the point of working? What's the point of getting up in the morning, going to the office, whether it's private or public? What's the point? So you're sort of getting into a state salary type of thing. You might as well just have a state salary,
Well, if they
or
hire you, I mean, they haven't got infinite jobs, so you're on the dole. And then the question still remains, why should I go to work? But that is the situation that the whole of Europe finds itself in, and America finds itself in. And the answer is the one that nobody wants to hear in the public sector, which you've got to shrink the public sector. Or you've got to grow the private sector. Oh, what a good idea. Why don't we bring in lots of
No, no,
foreigners?
no, we
Oh,
can't. We don't like that growing the private sector is out. That's never going to happen with taxes at these levels. Nobody's going to bother setting up a company and being and taking all the risk and everything else of half of whatever you make, and then the
you
red
can tweak
tape.
that. You can tweak that. You can drop the corporation tax. You could give tax breaks. I
But
mean,
they don't
Gordon
want you. But they
Brown's
don't want to do that. Don't want to. Yeah, but
R&D
that's
credits was a good example of that.
the lowering taxes is just not on the. It's not on the agenda at all, right? Because the demand for
Yeah, of course it's
welfare.
not. No, no, of course it's not. No, no,
So
exactly. I
so
never
it's
said that I never said they're going to solve it. I was just saying that it is solvable.
yeah.
I'm not saying they're going to.
But you're earning under 30 grand, there's no point working, let's say. If you're over a certain age, there's no point working either. So I'm like, say I'm nearly 60, right? What's the point of working now? Nothing. No, there's
You
no
know,
there's no point.
that's I'm not in disagreement with that. It's
Oh, okay.
how is it going to be turned around? And the point is it going to be turned around? And if it isn't turned around, what happens next? And at the end of the day, you just get a government like a Thatcher government comes in and sorts it out, or you get into the Argentinian issue of just going downhill, 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 and downhill, going from being one of the richest countries in the world to being one of the poorest. And which road is the UK, which road is Europe going to go down, and which road is America going to go down? Because this whole thing, America versus China, is about America trying to pull itself out of a nosedive.
Hmm.
And who's trying to pull Britain out of a nosedive? Everybody's saying we're in one, but is anybody addressing it? Well, the Farage, of course,
Well,
who's
yeah, but
kind
I
of
suppose
trying.
the other way of looking at it is that given all these headwinds of taxation, demographics, and everything else, it's amazing that there's still the lights are on here, or there would be if it wasn't the daytime and the computer's working. It's amazing the system actually still works. I mean, it's like on what basis is everything working? So obviously there's a habit. People
Well,
have
why
a
are you
habit.
saying it's working?
Well, because I've got my
Why are you saying it's
Wi-Fi.
working? I think you're saying it's not working,
Hmm.
and it's slowly but surely falling to bits.
But yeah, well,
Yeah.
are
I
we
mean,
going
look at your roads. Look at your roads. Is it not falling to bits? Look at your trains. Is it not falling to bits?
Yeah, but it's sort of kind of still working. We've got a 1970s or 20th century infrastructure,
Well,
which
there you go.
it was built to last, right?
Momentum. Yeah. Momentum and entropy.
But yeah,
Climb
yeah,
and
but no,
fall.
but we're using we've got the old rail stock, we've got the old motorways, we're just literally running them down to the ground. and hoping that, and I suppose within, it must be within 10, 20 years, that will collapse too. I mean, you just can't keep running, motorways and other stuff like that, infrastructure, the sewage
I
system,
I
etc.
I think the pace of change, political change, is going to be quite interesting, and I think you'll see political change because look, if you go back 3 or 4 years, the small minority were saying what you were saying, and they were considered, violent right wing, jackbooting Nazis, right? Well, now it's the mainstream, almost the mainstream way of thinking. Well, that's gonna affect the ballot box when that next occurs. And the whole point about democracy is that it naturally selects new leaders that fit the gestalt. And what you're putting forward is the gestalt, if I can use a German word, and therefore the ballot box will reflect that, and therefore you'll get another group of people who going to give it a go. And when you think about the 1970s, and then you think about Thatcher as a crypto revolutionary, and you think about the aftermath of that financial markets industry privatization, and then after many years or number of years of restructuring, you had the booming 90s.
Yeah.
And that is what you pray democracy can deliver, a change in direction. Because if you've got some dictator in there who goes off on the wrong course and will not be replaced, then obviously you're going into a very, very, very bad place.
Right. So
And
finally,
let's talk money rather
oh,
than politics, because politics sucks. Doesn't everybody know that?
um, finally, just you talked about for Expo, and I sort of mentioned Eurasia. Any other things that you would like us to look at over the next few days?
Well, I mean, I think I suppose I should just look at what I've been buying really. I think Anglo American is very interesting because they're merging to make one of the top two or three um, copper mines, and copper is going to just be the next thing that people are going to be talking about, like they're talking about gold right now, is going to be copper. So 18 months down the line, it's going to be copper is going to be a big, big, hairy deal. And one of our community on NUFN brought up an interesting thing, which was I can't pronounce them. The guys that make Ozempic, no, Nordisk. You know the ones? Know the guys? Hold on a minute.
No,
I'm going to
no,
pull it
I think
up.
it's Nova Nordisk, something like
There
that.
you go, Novo Nordisk. They're on a 14 PE. They pay a 3% dividend,
That's very kind.
but they've gone up like a rocket and down like a rock. It's a real boom bubble crash chart, and they're in that crash section. And at some point, they're going to go out of that, and that's going to be a very interesting stock when it pulls out the nosedive and flattens out like it always does at the end of a crash of a good company. It always stops and goes sideways
Well,
for
no,
a bit,
the only thing with
and then
that
starts
is,
to go up.
the only thing with that is, and it's a subject close to my heart, is that if they need to make, everyone's waiting for the weight loss pill rather than the weight loss jab.
Yeah, it's on its way. There's a load of
But
that on its
but
way.
but actually, you
Absolutely.
don't even. I mean, it's like you don't even need the weight loss pill, really. So the point there is that the weight loss jab is probably still a better, more effective means of delivery than the weight loss pill would ever be. I mean, that's just the way it's the difference between pills and whatever. So your idea of Novo Nordisk coming out of a crash, it probably is correct for not just the reason it's been down a lot and it's going to go back up again, but it is a phenomenon. And I think the statistic is 2.5 million people in the country are on these 2.5 million
Yeah. But
fatties are on this.
there is a big wave of these medicines coming. But the point is, up like a rocket, down like a rock, goes flat, starts to tick up. That's the time to buy. You're a chartist, you know that. And know them, they're on that road. And it's maybe a little bit earlier because they're still on the crash road, although it's come down a hell of a long way. But you just watch it, and everybody goes, "Urgh." You just watch
Well,
it,
no, I think
you just
there's a
watch it.
difference between that and say a smarter web where they raise a lot of money to buy Bitcoin and they've got 200 million pounds worth of Bitcoin, and their market cap is going back down to whatever a discount on the uh, MNAV is. So, but they're not paying a
Well, there's a
dividend,
better than 50% chance that the Bitcoin crash is on. Better than 50%. It
really.
could turn around, but oh dear. Ooh, it's looking pretty spicy. So if it goes much further in the next few days, we're probably in that Bitcoin crash that it was always coming and is always coming, and then it's down to 60 to 40,000, and then crypto winter around the bottom, and then halvening, up she'll go. Okay, but that might be kicking off right now. So if you're into crypto, it's going to be a very, very bumpy few days for sure. And Mr. Saylor will have to come out and buy a lot more Bitcoin to keep this one afloat.
It's a bit, I think, because the store of value thing is a thing, but the problem is at the moment with the
It's
problem
a
you had.
terrible store of value.
Yeah, but
It's a terrible store of
the
value.
stock market sneezes and Bitcoin catches a cold, which is not quite what it's supposed to be. I mean, I think it's useful if you're trying to, leave one developing country and go to another, and you just take your wallet with you or whatever you do. But
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
it's more of a banking app rather than a store of value thing. But
It's a terrible store of value because you're always vulnerable to be robbed. Yeah. If you get, no one can rob your Vodafone. Nobody can, rob your gold in a proper vault. Nobody can, rob you of various assets, your government bonds. Like, it's possible, but it's
mm,
very, 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 very difficult.
mm.
Crypto, it's not only possible, it happens all the blooming time. It's the biggest robberies in the history of humanity have been Bitcoin in the last 3 years. No one's ever robbed a bank like people have been robbed of the sums of Bitcoin. It's just, another zero of the scale of robberies that have been going on in Bitcoin. It's not a good store of value. There is no such thing as a cold wallet. I don't care what anybody says. No wallet is cold. They're all different levels of warmth. Oh, well, I engraved my private key on a sheet of steel. Yeah, where have you put that then? Well, I'll put it in my safe. Where's your safe then? Well, it's kind of in my house. Okay, take your safe. You're gone, aren't you? Okay, well, I've hidden it. Okay, what happens if you lose it? Oh, bah. I've written it down on a piece of paper. What happens if your house burns down? Well, I've hidden it I put it in a safe deposit box. How secure is a safe deposit box? So you are never safe. What about quantum computing in a few years, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It's a very poor store of wealth because it doesn't store very well and it doesn't store very securely. It's a very good way. It's a very good flight asset. Its use case
Yes,
is
yes, yes.
gambling,
Yeah,
criminality, and flight.
all the
And
good
and
stuff.
it's very good at those things.
Well, on that very upbeat note, if you're a shorter of Bitcoin and crypto, thank you very much to Clem Chambes from
I'm
the
not
US.
shorter. I'm not. I don't short. I'm a terrible shorter,
Oh,
but I'm quite good at spotting when things have hit a top and when they might come off. In the same way as I'm very good at finding a bottom and getting in near the bottom of things, like our friend Ferex Bro, which I think might be quite interesting going forward. And like I was saying about Mr. Ozempic, that's coming down. That's probably going to come down further. Then it's going to bottom, and then it's going to tick up, and that's the time you buy. Copper. What did I say about copper? Copper's going to go up. Not today, not tomorrow, but sometime soon, and then for a very long time. It's not about getting in when it's gone up. It's about getting in before it gets up.
Clem Chambers from a newfn.com. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much, Zach, for having me, and I'll see you again next Friday and we can fix the world again.
Cheers.